Good morning. Welcome to this edition of the Sports Philanthropy webinar series. Today we're very excited to have with us Elizabeth Finlayson. And Elizabeth is the nonprofit coach and does terrific work in fundraising. I know, at least in the Chicago area, we're having terrible weather and storms, so we may have some technical glitches. So hopefully you'll just stick with us if that happens. On my behalf and on behalf of Kayla, who is the VP of Community Development for the Sports Philanthropy Network, apparently dropped off, but she'll be right back. I want to welcome you to this webinar. We encourage everybody to participate with video if you're able to. We certainly understand sometimes there's background distractions and sometimes there's kids running around or pets, so that's not a problem. Probably best if you do have background noise, just mute the microphone and then we can have you participate. At the end, we will be sending some surveys and evaluations out, so I hope you participate in that and let us know what other types of topics you would like to see for our webinars. We're still going to have these running 3 times a week through the end of May, so we've got a great schedule coming up for May. It's hard to believe we've only been doing this a month, but it keeps going on and on and on. So before we get started, I'd like to have everybody just go around and introduce themselves. I know some people are juggling other engagements, so if I call on you and you can't answer, that's okay. Kayla, do you want to start? Okay, Kayla will come back in a minute. Maybe she's having technical difficulties. Doug, I can see you there. Oh, there's Kayla.
I'm just being in the chat. I think it would be best if I don't see any of your and hear garbling. I just heard me introducing everything.
All right, so Kayla will jump back on the phone, I think. Doug?
My name's Doug Garner. I'm the Adapted Sports Director at University of Texas Arlington and the men's wheelchair basketball coach.
Great. Christian? Well, Christian's a little garbled. Christian, we'll come back to you in a minute and see if we can get cleaner audio. Dion, are you available?
I sure am. This is Dion Thomas. I'm the Associate Director of Development for the University of Illinois. Thanks for having me on. And Roy, thanks for doing these. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Brandon?
Teaching life.
Okay, well, we lost Brandon for a minute there. Christian, you want to try with now the video off? Maybe the audio will be better.
1, 2, 3. I work with the coach across. You report organizations around sport as a teaching vehicle.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm losing on the sound there. I'm not sure if others are having that same thing. Bob, you want to try?
I'll give it a try. I'm Bob Dickinson. I'm the executive director of STEAM Sports Foundation in Atlanta, Georgia. STEAM being the acronym that most people are familiar with: science, technology, engineering, art, and math. We're 5 years old. We are a little bit older demographic than a lot of STEAM STEM do. High school and college, college, on career development and mostly through summit workshops.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I know we seem to be having some technical glitches. I'm not sure exactly what's causing those. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right, and we'll be able to hear Elizabeth all right. If you want to put questions into the chat, or I know that there were difficulties on the sound. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, go ahead as well, so that everybody can see who you are and what organization. I'm assuming we'll have some other people jumping in here. If we had challenges, I imagine that there's others that did as well, because we had about 20 people signed up. So I expect some of them to come on soon. But very excited today to have with us Elizabeth Finlayson. And Elizabeth, her company is called the Nonprofit Coach, and she does a lot of work with obviously nonprofit organizations in all kinds of phases, from fundraising to board development to strategy. And so today Elizabeth is going to concentrate her presentation on the fundraising side of things. And Elizabeth, I'll let you pop your screen up for the share and take it away.
Okay, great. See you now? Yeah. Okay.
I can hear you. I can't see. There we go. There's the screen.
All right. So today, the topic of today's fundraising is strengthening fundraising. I'm going to focus on essentials, really deep into different fundraising streams and things like that. But there are some things that are across the board, relate to whatever budget size you are, whatever mission you have, and whatever ask vehicle you're using. And things I wanted to on today. Just a little bit about me. Fundraising 2 months before September 11th, so this will unfortunately be my third recession. And my mission is to create a fairer, more equitable and inclusive world with empathy and beauty. And so I get to do that every day by waking up, and me and my team get to support fantastic nonprofits like yours. So for what you do, because you make my life fulfilling. So I appreciate that. All right, so I just wanted to give a very quick overview on versus, we could again talk about this stuff the hour and really the whole day. One thing I really want to fully understand is you look at this circle, this disc in the middle of this picture, you can see 68% the individuals. There's that entity. And then you can also use a 9% in yellow that's giving by also individuals. So the key I really just want people to understand is the majority of dollars come from individuals. A lot of small mid-sized organizations focus a lot on grant writing and a lot on events. And I think there's great reasons, things that make sense. Introduce people to your organization. A foundation gives explicit about how to get money from them. It's less awkward. Operations, a lot of times people are like, well, they have so much. Their job is to be self-interested. So I just want to be really clear in this picture that, where the majority of dollars are. And you can see giving by individual down. This data is 2018 data, which was analyzed in 2019. This is the last available report. So presumably we'll be getting more reports soon. We already know that individual giving, it has gone up in the last year, and now we're in a pandemic. So I do want to talk a little bit about what giving trends are happening right now, but we'll touch that at the end presentation. Does anybody have questions on giving sources and funding sources?
There's one question from Christian in terms of where you classify donor advised funds in that chart.
Ooh, that is a really good question. Not sure where they put donor advised funds. They may still be under individuals, or they may be under, really sure. I believe it's under individuals. You're right that advised funds are in that kind of middle ground, is that they're from individuals, but they are a fund money set aside giving, just like a foundation. So they're kind of like a hybrid. And I'm really glad you brought donor advised funds, because they are crucial in emergencies. I'm really recommending that all of my clients go back through their donor records and figure out who their
who of their donors have donor advised funds so that they can capitalize on that right now. It's saying that my internet is unstable, so I want to stop sharing for just 1 second, and I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to return to the screen share. All right, here we go. Can everyone still see that giving picture?
Not yet, but it's coming back. There we go.
It's coming up. Okay. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide here. All right, so one of the 5 essentials I wanted to talk about was mindset. Now, I do not want to get mystical with you. I'm not talking about standing in front of a mirror and doing affirmations. I am not talking about that. But I was having a conversation the other day with another consultant about how much of our time we spend as consultants dealing with mindset of clients. So I think one way I can put it is this: you cannot believe your way into donations, but you can disbelieve your way out of donations, is the way that I would put it. And what I mean by that is that when we have limiting thoughts, we then limit our own actions. Action being access to the results that we want. We can take an action and we may or may not get a result. But if we don't take an action, we will not get a result. And I have plenty of clients who are very busy doing all kinds of activities, but those activities are not the kind that help them increase their funding. So I'll give you an example is that I've been working with a client for about 3.5 years now. And when I met them, their organization had been around for 20 years. They were beloved in their area, but they had no paid administrative staff. So their executive director was working full-time, but without pay. Their board was ineffective. And when you talk to them, there wasn't a lot of hope for changing those things. The mindset was a lot of, well, this is how it is. And they wanted things to be different. But, you know, like many of us, if we want something to be different, we often externalize that. If only they would do this, if the board member would do that, if they would do this. But I've been able to work with them over these last couple of years, and I'll get back to the results that have happened around their mindset and what's come from that, but I'll talk about what kind of mindset limitations are there. So one is identity. Anytime you find yourself saying, I'm not that kind of person, I really want you to stop and look at what you're talking about. When you were born, you were not a type of person, you were a person, and then you've had a series of experiences that have then caused you to make decisions about yourself. I am this, I am not that. And where that can come in the way of fundraising is, let's say somebody says, you know, I'm a nice person. I don't, you know, I'm not pushy like that. I don't get in people's faces. I don't do those kind of things. That's the kind of limitation that would stop you from fundraising. Or, yeah, I think that I'm going to get to another one in a second. So let's talk about another one. Fear of judgment. What will they think? That's another one that I think is really, really limiting. So right now, a lot of people are asking themselves, should I be asking for money for my organization? They're saying, if I'm not a health organization, if I'm not on the front lines and people aren't dying, does anybody even care about my organization? That is a limiting thought. And the answer is yes, your donors do care. And if you're sensitive in the way that you're asking, and you're able to present the real needs of your organization, you are able to make an ask. It's just an invitation. It's just an invitation. But when we're afraid of judgment, what do they think? What if I appear selfish? What if I seem tone deaf? All that stuff will stop us from doing what we need for our organizations. And another way to look at it is, if when this crisis is over, our organization is closed because we have been too afraid to ask, then we have done a disservice to both the people that we serve and to our donors. You know, I really want that to sink in. The other thing that I see, a lot of people who go into nonprofit work care deeply about people. and, you know, maybe come from a background where that was really emphasized a lot. And so one of the things I sometimes see is when people come from a religious background, and I come from a Christian background, there can be a lot of emphasis on suffering and martyrdom. And I have to spend a lot of time with clients who have that kind of background to get them to take actions that allow them to stop suffering. And I know that that sounds crazy, but it is absolutely true. Examples are doing all the work yourself, not having high enough expectations of your board, not letting people know when they've let you down and they're not meeting those expectations, not appropriately relying on volunteers. These are all examples of letting that kind of thinking limit the kind of behaviors you're taking. And as I said, this is my personal background as well, and I find it all the time in my business. I love helping nonprofits, and so in the past, I've had a hard time charging market rates for my services. Well, that has a direct impact on my family. And so if you think that possibly you're making any of those kind of decisions around the way you're running your nonprofit, I'm going to ask you right now to stop, because it is not helping your nonprofit. It's not helping the people you serve. It's not helping you, and it's not helping your organization. So getting back to that story of the client that I've been helping, I helped them realize that their quote unquote lack of selfishness was hurting their organization, that they now pay their full-time executive director, and they ask more of their board members. Their board members are now more engaged and are stepping up to take on more activities in the organization. And now what they're looking to do is to increase the pay of their program staff, because that has been so low. They've had a perpetual turnover, which is in some cases threatened to shut down the activities of their organization. So you can see what starts as something kind of esoteric like a mindset actually can have a lot of real life implications. So I do want to stop there and just see if this is landing for anybody, or if they've got an example of this in their own organizations or their own lives.
One thing I thought we would do here while we have a minute is I'm going to put up a poll for people to participate. There's 2 questions, and you'll see one is, what is your biggest fundraising struggle as a result of COVID-19? And the second one is, what do you anticipate the biggest challenge will be moving forward? So I put those up now. See if we can get everybody to
Awesome.
vote.
These are great. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Let's talk about our board of directors. So I have never met an organization of any budget size that did not have complaints about their board of directors. Actually, that's not true. I met one, and then I realized their expectations were too low. So one of the reasons for that, honestly, is really the legal structure of a nonprofit causes a lot of those problems. So one of the ways just a good description of this is that you have an organization, and in your organization are people who are experts at what they do. That's why you've hired them. That's why they're doing that. If they didn't start that way in the beginning, maybe over the years they've become that way. Your board of directors are in charge of your organization, but they are unpaid, and they often don't have background or experience in the work that you do or in running a nonprofit. And then we sit back and we want them to do things, usually fundraising, which we then usually often don't tell them, and we're not explicit about what our expectations are. And then they do our work when they get a chance after all of their other paid responsibilities and their family responsibilities. And then we have to tell them what to do, but they're our bosses, and then they have to tell us what to do. It's a cycle that doesn't really work, but I can give you a lot of tips of what to do in the meantime. So a lot of times people say, I have a board and only a few of the people are active and the other people don't do anything. The first thing to share is use the ones at work. It's really typical in a group that you've got some people that are star performers and some people that aren't. And so the people that are, use them. If you have to rely more heavily on them than the others, don't despair, just use what you have that works. The next thing is that have any of your asks, anything you want your board members to do, to come from those top board members. So if you've got those superstars, have them be the one who asks all the other board members to buy a table at the event, or to participate in your year-end appeal, or to do some kind of activity or initiative. It's so much more effective coming from them than it is coming from you, because they don't have a paid stake, and so their message isn't tainted by that, and your board members are going to hear it differently. Also, people want to look good, and the other board members performing at a high level makes them feel that they also have to perform at a high level. One of the things I really recommend, and this is across staff and board members, is to use people's personality and skills in a way that works for them. When people think about fundraising and they'll say to me, I don't like fundraising, I really am quick to point out that there's all different ways to fundraise. And a lot of times when we're turning to our board, we're turning to the most extroverted ways of fundraising. We want them to come to events, or to speak at events, or speak at their workplace, or invite their friends. But I've known fantastic board members who had 2 friends and a large checkbook. So what I mean by using their personalities and skills is, as we've talked about these different areas of fundraising, there is grant writing, there is research, there are people who have small numbers of friends, but they have very deep friendships with those people. They could be having very deep conversations with them, or inviting them in to participate in an activity, and maybe they have larger networks. There's all different ways you could be working with people. So I recommend being a little bit flexible and presenting a menu of opportunities to your board. And you should have some minimum expectations of what they should do. We know that 100% of your board members need to be giving. You are graded by that by foundations in your applications. But beyond that, think about ways in which people can feel successful and supportive of your organization that fits them. One of the great ways of doing that is having them participate in thank you calls to your donors. Pick a donor amount that's doable. I've often done $100 and up, but you could do $1,000 and up if you are really strapped for time, and have your board members making those phone calls. You don't have to be, a super extroverted person to do that. And a lot of people feel great about that kind of thing. Have straightforward, non-judgmental conversations with your board members. This is in the beginning when you're bringing them on, and this is also towards the end or in the middle when they're not meeting your expectations. If we're coming from a place of anger and judgment, it's really hard to have that conversation that you haven't been showing up to the meetings, or I noticed you haven't been returning my emails, or you didn't do the project that you said you were going to do. If you have a straightforward, non-judgmental conversation, you can find out what's going on for them, and you can acknowledge, oh, you've had a new baby in the house, or you just got and you can say, is this really too much? Do you want this project to someone else? Do you want to delay for 3 months? Are you still interested in being on this? If you're not, ask a lot of questions and be curious and get to the heart of it. We set great expectations with them in the process. Board members often the recruitment process. I'm not. If you do that, you need to tell them be on the board and.
Thanks, Odin. Thanks for risking your life for and us.
For snack food. Anything for snack food.
Really, that's what we'll do. And it's okay because we make them work and overlooking our app. Our mission, I want to be in what that could let program update of your program, either program actually sure their job. So we because they have a background, because they're a lawyer, they have some it is acting with can and do the once you get straightforward conversation, drag just so I'm gonna stop in the chat and so just jump in. It's a great. It's always challenging that dating and for it should not, you know, if you've really been in a relationship, finding out actually be looking for you to, and if you or something, so putting yourself at risk, look what mindset change are look you believe that's the reason it's challenging. All right, those percentage instead of full. Text to the question. Is that related to an event or is that related to a donor? Yeah, if you could give some context on that, touch base on that. All right, Roy. So Roy, it sounds like you're struggling to. Is anyone struggling to hear me?
Yeah, on my audio, it's cutting in.
I am.
Okay, you're all struggling to hear me. Okay. Well, that is a problem. Here's what I'm doing. So Bob says his hearing is fine. Oh, so Brandon's saying the season is due to COVID. Yes, so you gave the option to get a full refund instead of a percentage. I guess my question is, did you present it in the context of the needs of your organization? So, I mean, there are people who are going to need back no matter what, but if you let people know they could convert it to a donation, that your organization needs it to survive, and you really make the case for your organization, I think that makes it easier than just having it as, oh, you can get your whole money back. Well, lots of people are just going to choose that because they need their money or they want their money. But if you propose it as an ask with a donation and letting them know that it is tax deductible, I think that creates a good situation.
I think that's
So,
an important that's an important point
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
people to really follow up on, because oftentimes the first reaction you're going to get from donors or people who've purchased tickets for a dinner or fundraising event when everything gets canceled is, I want my money back because I don't get to go to the event, I don't get to have dinner, I don't get to see my friends. But when you, as Elizabeth said, put it in the context of what the organization does and tell them, you know, yeah, you're not getting your dinner, but you weren't coming specifically because of dinner. You're coming because you want to support our cause and our mission. And so, yeah, maybe it's money that you would not have donated, but in a sense, you've already paid that money out. And what I think that I've seen in the past and going on now as well is that a significant percentage, certainly not everybody, but a significant percentage will leave those amounts as a donation. And some will ask for a refund, some might ask for a partial refund. But when you look at the dollars it costs to throw fundraising events, what you sometimes see is that if the event is canceled and they don't have a lot of cancellation fees, they may actually make more money for the organization because you've charged $200 to come to a dinner, and your hard costs into that were going to be $100 or more per person. And if you don't have the event, that can go straight as a donation.
Okay,
Okay,
I am switching my
I am
audio.
switching my audio, so if you'll just give me a moment.
All right, we'll see if in the meantime, while Elizabeth is getting set up, I'll kind of just go through the poll results here. And we had a pretty good split on the first question of what is the biggest fundraising struggle as a result of COVID-19. And we had a third of the people saying the canceled, delayed, rescheduled fundraising events, a third saying other donors are giving to COVID-19 causes, and a third talking about the fact that donors are not willing to make gifts during the crisis. And then as we look
I
at what the anticipated challenges are going to be going forward,
no, not yet.
it looks like what we're
Yeah.
seeing is the uncertainty of the duration of the COVID-19 crisis is the leading one.
Yeah.
Somebody's
I can
got
call.
their, let me
I
see.
know last time I called, they.
All right. We got to mute somebody out. Sorry about that. The uncertainty of the duration of the COVID-19 crisis was the winner. Second place is that donors are in a worse financial position. And then we had one vote for sponsors not being willing to make a commitment. And I think that we're going to see that come up with a lot of other groups as we go forward, because right now sponsors aren't being asked to make a commitment because there's no events going on. And so it's in a sense almost easier for them not to get into the conversation. But I think we're going to see a lot of competition for those dollars come the fall if we are able to have events.
Okay, I've switched over to my phone audio. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, we'll just go from there. So there was one more question related to boards and asking for a good amount. I would actually scale it towards what you consider a major gift in your organization. I think that all board members should be giving what is considered a major gift to your organization unless you've got a great reason. So a great reason would be on your board, you made sure to have some representation of a population that you're serving that typically doesn't have a lot of financial resources. So you brought them on as a representative of that viewpoint, and you know that what they're bringing is not dollars, but really their perspective. That would be an exception. For a lot of small organizations, a major gift starts at $1,000, and then I've known organizations in which a $10,000 or gift is not considered a major gift because they get much higher gifts. So, but I would say you want to scale all your board gifts towards at least a minimum of a major gift, and really based on their own expectations, like their own resources. All right, I am going to keep us moving forward here. So let's talk about relationships and communication. So, you know, I just keep using this quote over and over again. So I work with an organization called Network for Good. They provide smart, simple fundraising solutions in the case of software. And Kimberly O'Donnell there said this, and I just quoted her over and over again. There's not a lot we can control right now, but we can control our donor relationships. So I just really want to emphasize right now that while we're stuck in our homes and we can't have our events and we're trying to figure out what to do, call your donors. Call them and ask how they are and how they're doing. And one of the ways to make this not weird or creepy or anything like that is to actually care how they're doing. So, you know, sometimes I think people get really hung up in fundraising about how to do something and it should be this. But if you really start from caring, there's not a lot you can do wrong. So I would start there. The other thing is right before this hit, I had just been on a webinar that was presenting some results talking about how trust is down across all sectors. So it was down around government and it was down for for-profit, but it's actually down for nonprofit as well, which almost never happens. Usually when trust goes down in those first two sectors, it goes up for the nonprofit sector. And what this means is that people don't feel like there's a soft place to land. They don't know who to trust. They don't know where to get their information from. And I think you can see this in our, we'll say, diverse media landscape. You know, people are getting news from Facebook, people are getting from all over the place, and nobody knows what to trust. So one of the ways that you can remedy this is to increase your communication. And during a crisis, you really should consider doubling your communication. So if you've been posting on Facebook once a day, do it twice a day. If you've been doing it once a week, do it twice a week. But make sure you're increasing and that your donors and everybody else is hearing about from you. One of the big complaints with donors is that they feel like they're treated like ATMs. We know that on average in nonprofits, donor retention, that means keeping a donor from 1 year to the next, is about 40%, which means that every year we're losing 60% of our donors. Now, every organization is different, and one of the reasons as nonprofits we often don't notice this is because we often get in new donors that make up for this. But if you can increase your donor retention even by 10%, like if you kept half of your donors instead of 40%, that makes a big difference. It's much more cost effective to keep your donors than to get new donors. And many of our development activities are oriented around acquisition, acquisition, acquisition constantly, and not on keeping the donors we have. So one of the ways you can do this is to increase your communication. I think many of us know this these days, but use personal stories for people to identify with your organization and the people it serves. People have a hard time relating to a series of numbers or stories or something that feels large and out of their control. Like if 10,000 people are affected by your organization's issue, people can't relate to that as well as they can with a personal story. So what you want to do is really balance head and heart. So have your personal story and then have your facts that like 10,000 people are being affected by it. So then people can see, wow, there's 10,000 Yolandas. It's not one person. It's that person multiplied by 10,000 times. And that will help people really connect to that. And one of the things to know is they've done some multi-year studies looking at the lifetime value of donors and looking at what communication channels they were on. And they found that people who were communicated through multiple channels gave it more often at a higher average dollar amount and for more numbers of years. So their lifetime value was much higher than those who were just following through one channel or another. And that's why it is important for us to have these multiple channels that we're sending out there. And then the other thing I just want to put in there is some organizations don't ask very often, and some, the only communication they're giving their donors or anyone on their list is an ask. And I would say if you're in that second category, bring it down to your ask is about 25% of what's getting out there, so that 3 out of the 4 communications you're sending to your list are things about your organization. Okay, again, I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions.
I think one important point that Elizabeth hit on before was setting the expectations for the board and making sure that they understand, as it's called, sort of the give or get mentality of the board needing to go out and be a significant part of the fundraising. Elizabeth, how do you set those expectations for the board members when they when they join the organization?
That's a great question. So in the recruitment process, one, make sure you've got really good documents that that potential board member can look over and analyze whether they want to participate. So one is having a job description for them. 2, having explicit statements of what is a minimum gift for your board members, and all the activities you expect them to participate in. So for your organization, is it expected everybody attends the event and tries to sell tickets? What are the different expectations that are within that year? And have them sign it when they're coming on. And look for those doubts that they're having or clues that they're giving you that they are not interested in participating in those activities. So I would say, being incredibly explicit. And if somebody says something that they're not willing to fundraise or that's not their thing, find a different role, get them on a different committee. Maybe they just like to plan events and pick out tablecloths, or maybe they like to teach kids things. Pick the thing that they can do, but don't put them on your board if they're not willing to fundraise.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, right. So I want to talk now about tracking data and analytics. Again, we could spend the whole hour on this, and I love this topic so much. But I just want to touch on a couple of key points. Fundraising is both an art and a science. It takes creativity and connection to people and ingenuity. But frequently people are guessing incorrectly when their data could tell them when something works or doesn't work. Right now, when we're all in this big shutdown and we're stuck on our computers and we're not making lunch meetings with people, it's a great time to be updating your database. Go through your donor records. If you're calling those donors and just checking up on them and having a relationship, it's a great time to clean up that record, and it's a good time to ask them about why they donated and put all those notes into that database. I have a rule with myself. If I touch a record, it's going to be better than when I'm going to leave it better than when I first came in. So really think about doing that right now. I have this philosophy. I like that if I were hit by a bus, could someone walk in tomorrow and do my job? And if I'm keeping my notes in my database, they can pick up the phone and call those same donors that I have relationships with and go from there. And then my organization doesn't suffer. The other thing is test whenever possible. Right now, most email systems have options for A/B testing. And this is an opportunity that you should take advantage of it. And I try to do testing in almost anything I can with fundraising. It's a lot easier with email solicitations, direct mail, using surveys, all of those kind of things. One thing to know is the smaller your list is, the harder it is to get statistically significant event results from those tests. So what you want to do is to test bigger, more dramatic things. So very large organizations that are sending out to, let's say, sending letters to millions of people across the country, they can test something small, Like if a stamp is crooked on an envelope, is someone more likely to open it? The answer is yes. But most of us don't have that opportunity, that list. So you want to test something really big, like a personal story versus no personal story. Having one programmatic focus versus another, having pictures in it, not having pictures in it, having a video, not having a video. Have something that has a substantial difference, and then try to keep all other variables as similar as possible. So I did a test where I was doing with an organization that deals with a really tough subject matter with kids that get injured. And so we did a letter that was positive and dealt with like happy kids and what happens when we do this work, we save kids. And we dealt with a negative story of what happens when we're focused on, a tragic incident with a child. And we looked at those two messages. In order for that to be as quality a test as we could, I made the paragraph sizes the same. I made the sentences track the same way. I kept as much of the text the same as possible, but just changed the tone between the two things. So those are the things that you can be testing so that every time you send something out, you get better at knowing what people want. You definitely want to be tracking your donor retention. It is one of, I think, the key metrics we need to be looking at. And you want to be tracking your average gift, and you want to be tracking how much it costs to acquire a donor. For small organizations, that costs, let's say, I get my donor through a mailing campaign. I would want to track the cost of the paper, the cost of any kind of mailing house or services, any designers I've used, any of the vendors, the cost of the postage, all of that. So I put those costs in when I'm figuring out how much it costs to get a donor and how much it costs to raise $1 from that activity. It's much easier to figure out what to do and to convince your board or ED when you are using data and metrics. I've had people just tell me all kinds of things I knew were absolutely not true and trying to change how I do my job. And I could just say, well, actually, long letters work better than short letters. Actually, personal stories work better than no personal stories. And I can point to the data. I'm going to stop there, and I saw a chat question come up. And so I just want to check in about that for a second. Do you calculate the cost of your time? If you are able to do this, absolutely. We know that the cost.
Whoop. Looks like we might have lost Elizabeth again. Everybody else with us still?
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully Elizabeth will jump back on. But I think that one of the things that Elizabeth is talking about that's really critical is the ability to measure and track. And I know with a lot of the people on here, it's challenging because we are coming from smaller organizations where we don't have as big of a staff that is
Can you
connected.
guys hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
You can hear you.
Okay, I'm switching audio again. So I've lost the phone connection and now I'm going to use the computer connection. So it looks like our weather is really affecting this. I
Yeah.
apologize for that, guys.
So Elizabeth, one thing I was saying is, as you dropped off there, is one of the challenges I think for a lot of organizations, especially smaller organizations, is these are all great, but right, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time to devote to that when you have a small staff to go through and deal with those. So how would you suggest prioritizing which of these elements they should focus on?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say is that if you're using a good database system, it should have some of these tracking functions in for you already. So I think the first thing I would recommend is get yourself in a database if you are not. That's crucial.
And what do you recommend as a couple options of database systems?
Well, yeah. So like I said, I work for Network for Good, and I don't know the pricing options on there, but I will say it is a software package that is specifically meant for small to mid-sized organizations, and it is very user friendly, and it has high functionality for being user friendly. It is not a system like Razor's Edge Blackbaud, which costs tons and tons of money and has lots of bells and whistles, which is great for a really big shop. It's so, you know, I've used Salesforce and I wouldn't recommend it. I know a lot of people are like, yay, it's free. But if you were looking for something free, I use HubSpot for my business, although they definitely have functions that once you start to grow, you then need to pay for them. So, yes, Donor Perfect. It's a little clunky. I'm not sure what their new system is. Neon is here in Chicago. It has a good combination of the old great features they used to have in databases with a lot of the online functionality. And what's great is when you've got a database nowadays, you're often sending your email straight from that database, and that data is captured too. So you can see, oh, they opened that email and then they made that donation. It's a lot clearer than when those were in separate systems.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I do want to talk about asks. Like I said,
Sorry, Elizabeth,
yeah, go ahead.
just before you go there, I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, but due to the glitches and weather and things like that, I want to make sure Elizabeth has enough time to finish her presentation and questions. But so I encourage you to stay on as long as you're able to, but we also recognize people have other commitments, and if you're like a lot of us, it's back to back to back to back Zoom calls all day. So thank you for being here. We appreciate your support and participation, and I'll throw it back to Elizabeth.
Thanks. Yes. So I just want to end on asks that a lot of people either are asking too much, as in it's the only communication they give with their donors, or they're not asking enough because they're scared. And, you know, we've talked about some of the mindset issues, but asks are essential. You know, I've mentioned about how it's like a marriage proposal. Don't keep going out with your donors and not asking them to marry you. That gets super weird. There are great times to ask. So one of the things I want to emphasize is ask when you need it. Right now might be a time when you need it, in which case, please do that asking. It is imperative that you do that. When you have an important message to communicate, is there something really important going on in your organization, some kind of transition, something going on in your sector, your industry? Make sure those are times that you're asking. 11 to 12 months from your donor's last gift. So, you know, if you're not renewing someone within those 12 months, you are allowing them to lapse. So please make sure you're paying attention to how long it's been since your donors have given, so that you can make that ask. And then the other thing to know is during year end, December is the biggest giving month of the year, and December 31st is the biggest giving day of the year. So please make sure that you've got your ask communications going out during that time. Be brave. The worst thing that could happen is that they could say no. Sometimes people don't like us in the world. That happens even when we don't ask them. So, you know, put yourself at risk and be brave. Ask them to increase their donations. Every time, you know, once a year when you're doing maybe your big push, maybe at year end, make sure you're not just asking them to give 100 again, or worse, asking them for a specific dollar amount. If they gave 100 last year, ask them for 125, ask them for 150. Now, and we're in a recession, so one of the things to know is that your donors may be giving smaller dollar amounts right now. In the last few recessions, the numbers had, so you may raw.
Well, looks like we lost Elizabeth again, so we'll see if she's able to come back on here. I'll talk to Elizabeth and see if we can get more of the detail, because I know we certainly lost some of the content in a few of those glitches. But I want to thank everybody for being on here today. I want to thank Elizabeth for her presentation, and we'll put these slides and the video up. And if you have any questions, we'll make sure that we can get you in touch with Elizabeth. Appreciate everybody being here. We encourage you to jump on and look at our social media channels. In particular, go subscribe to our YouTube channel. A lot of the podcasts, the webinars, and we're going to start some other content going up there soon as well. Thank you again for being here, and wishing everybody a great week, and stay safe, stay healthy, and live generously. Thank you.